about rugby league is that it doesn't discriminate, whether you're 16 stone on an empty stomach or 5'2" with your socks on. If you have the skill and determination, there's no reason why you can't lead your side into a first-grade grand final. It's hard to imagine a better symbol for football equality than John O'Grady's famous portrait of Arthur Summons and Norm Provan after the 1963 grand final. Rugby League's most enduring image eventually transformed itself into the Winfield Cup, which remains a constant reminder of the way we like to see the game played and the type of men we like to see playing it. Tonight, the Seven Sports team brings you the cream of the crop, legends from the 60s and 70s whose talents defined and transformed the game of rugby league. With the help of league writers Ian Heads and Alan Clarkson, we remember the classic matches of the past, prise loose a few tales of the golden days and find out how the heroes of yesteryear keep themselves out of trouble today.
A face of despair.
I'll do my best to get a rise out of Arthur Beetson, and best of all, South Sydney stars of the 50s Jack Rayner and Bernie Purcell tackle the past, the present and each other.
When I first went to South, I used to call him Mr. Rayner.
That's a lot of rubbish, that is.
After I was there for a while, I used to say more than Mr.
You call me an old bee.
The toughest test for any champion is to achieve distinction in a team composed of nothing but champions. St George in the early 60s was such a side, and Reg Gasnier will always be remembered as one of rugby league's chosen few.
Well, it's always flattering. It's nice that people recognise you, particularly in business. I'm the marketing manager of Renown and Perlite, and it certainly helps me in marketing and sales. And yeah, it's quite flattering. I'm quite happy and pleased that people still recognise Reg Gasnier after all these years.
And why wouldn't they? Reg Gasnier in full flight, playing for Australia or the mighty Saints, was a near-perfect incarnation of the running centre three-quarter.
You usually don't say Reg, you say Bradman, you just say Gasnier, don't you? And it conjures up a vision of an absolutely majestic athlete from what I remember, with a very distinctive running style, the classic running style. I think, Clark, that would be a fair way to say it, with his head thrown back. He had an aristocratic style about running.
Just the tackling was a sensation, and Gasnier was just unbelievable. How he could put his head back, and the acceleration he had, and the swerve and sidesteps, and the whole bag of tricks that he had. And if you got that close enough to tackling, it was something special.
Gasnier's extraordinary talents earned him the admiration of fans and the football world at large, but his unselfishness on the field won him the gratitude of the boys at St George.
His winger scored heaps and heaps of tries because of his generosity. He would create the moment, wouldn't he? And then King or Lumsden or whoever was happened to be on the wing, they scored a bundle of tries because of him.
To many, the only disappointment in a career which encompassed everything there was to achieve in rugby league was that Gasnier gave the game away so early. But even living legends have commitments away from the spotlight.
I always said that whenever I retired, there'd be no Madame Melbers. That'll be it. I hang up the boots, and that's exactly how it happened.
The immediate reasons for Gasnier's retirement at the tender age of 28 were a broken leg suffered early on the 67 tour of England and ongoing knee trouble, which in those days was beyond the frontiers of orthopaedic surgery.
It was incredible with the cruciate ligament that I'd sort of made famous, because very few people had heard of cruciate ligaments until I did mine in 1966. I'll always remember a little old lady writing to me and asking me what cruciate ligament and how it could be fixed, because her dog had sustained a cruciate ligament injury, and could I help her? I thought, oh, crikey's.
South Sydney forwards Ron Coote and Bob McCarthy always reserved their best for Gasnier's Dragons. The young Rabbitohs eventually ended the Saints' incredible run of 11 straight premierships in 1967. But both recall the first assault 2 years earlier, when 78,000 people stretched the cricket ground beyond its limit and nerves began to fray in the dressing room.
Well, we was overawed by it all. Unbelievable game, because we could see, when we were sitting in the dressing room, we'd see people jumping over where the scoreboard was. You could see people jumping over the fence, and then they allowed them to come out on the ground. They were on the roof of the bob stand, which was just unbelievable. It was an old stand and probably could have caved in, and it could have been a catastrophe. But then we ran out in the field, and the roar of the crowd was just unbelievable.
Souths, that was that young, magnificent side that everyone thought they'd beaten St George through the year, and everyone thought that they were going to stop St George's run. And of course, when Souths are playing well, they come from everywhere, and it was a wonderful atmosphere, incredible game.
The Dragons held on for their 10th successive premiership, edging out Souths 12 points to 8. But perceptive spectators would have seen the promise of things to come at South Sydney. McCarthy was to become particularly effective by running wide of the ruck, and the 4-tackle rule, introduced in 1967, suited Souths right down to the ground.
Well, the proof the problem is in the eating. I mean, we won the competition that year, and then we won it the year after, and the year after till they turned the 4-tackle rule into the 6-tackle rule. By that time, I was used to playing out there. I always thought I had number 4 on my back, so when the 6-tackle rule came in, I still stayed out there. You needed binoculars to find him. But what made it worse, when we were tackling, we used to stay out there then.
Both Bob and Ron had turns at captaining Australia before leaving Souths to finish their careers with other clubs. Coote, who now officiates on the Rugby League judiciary, operates the McDonald's franchise in King's Cross. McCarthy is about to forsake his job as a Sydney car dealer to coach the club he grew up with, South Sydney. Every sport has its legendary moments and its legendary people, names that become inseparable from the game itself. Cricket, of course, had Bradman, and of all the tributes paid to the great batsman over the years, the most imposing would have to be the Bradman stand here at the SCG. But the cricket ground played host to a variety of sports, and the most important to New South Welshmen was rugby league. So, in the interests of fair play and equal opportunity, the monument which complements cricket's great structure is dedicated to the Bradman of football, Clive Churchill.
For a little man, and he was a small man, you know, compared to some of the fellas running around now, or even in that day too, but he's a cheeky little fella. He used to love taunting forwards. He'd run away from them. He wasn't that terribly quick, but he was elusive. He could get past them, then he'd turn around and blow a raspberry at them. He used to drive, the late Frank Farrell used to drive him mad. Stark raving mad.
He used to love beating Bumper. Yeah. Used to call him everything. We're all bumps. He'd run away from me, say, "Go on, you can't catch me, you can't catch me." And Bumper say, "If I do, I'll kill you, you little..." He was one of the team. And we were playing in that side. We didn't really realise what he was playing with, like how great he was and the things he'd do, like, you know. And he was a genius. He's the best. When they brought out that song with Tina, Grandma Tina, like she was simply the best, and I think Churchill is the best one I've seen.
One of the reasons Churchill made such an impact back in the early 50s was his revolutionary running play. Until then, fullbacks were pretty much content to simply catch the ball and kick it. But not even the Little Master could stop the enigmatic French tourists of 1951. The French back then were regarded with the same antipathy as they are now. But they beat Australia 2-1 in league's biggest ever boil-over.
In the lead up to the test matches, they were awful. They really were. They looked disgraceful. And the late Jersey Flegg, who was then the president of the Australian Rugby League, spoke to the Frenchman before the test, and we've always said he should have just kept his mouth shut, because whatever he said certainly sparked them up. They came out and they played a brand of football. It really is, it's a yardstick of how football should be played.
Alexander, long ball for Lions. Lions inside Meninga.
Sadly, the French teams of recent years have fallen a long way short of fulfilling the promise of 51. One player who can testify to the shifting standards of French football is a man whose meteoric rise to test level began the same year as Gaznier's, 1959.
You took your life in your hands every time you played in France, I reckon. Like, those buggers, all they want to do is kick. They won't stand up and punch, they'll kick, and they're not real proud, you know, whether it's your head or your foot they kick, you know. So, I mean, I always had a lot more respect for their filth than the Poms, but the Poms had every known way of giving you a cauliflower ear or a broken nose, I can tell you, you know.
Kelly making a
Noel Kelly was a typically tough forward in an era when all forwards were typically tough. Ned's impressive record for Western Suburbs and Australia includes some telling and near-symmetrical statistics. 15 times sent off, 16 broken noses.
when I first started off and probably earned the reputation. As soon as I got whacked, I thought, well, you know, Sydney or the bush here, and I'd bong them straight back. And of course, I developed a reputation for being a hothead and that, which I was too. But I mean, I'm probably still the same. You know.
At a luncheon the other day, Ned said to Rex Mossby, he said, "Rex, I didn't realise you were such a good player until I read your book." So only Ned could get away with something like that.
Well, I was born and bred in Goodna. That's between Ipswich and Brisbane. For those of you who know it, at the stage was the largest mental hospital in the Southern Hemisphere there. Half of them used to say there was more goodies inside than out, you know.
Try as you might, it's difficult to associate Noel Kelly with peace and tranquility. But when the going gets tough, the tough move somewhere a little quieter. These days you'll find Ned tinkering with his houseboat business on the Hawkesbury River, carefully nurturing the age-old art of staying dry when everything around you is uncompromisingly wet.
Mate, there was a period of times I was more in the water than out, I can tell you. And I was a bloody expert at falling in, but not an expert at getting out, because a lot of these places are not easy to get out, you know.
Do you want me to answer, do you?
Coming up next, some words of wisdom from Arthur Beetson.
Standing wide, Sattler takes the ball on the burst.
And true confessions from football's Iron Man.
I always thought it was a game for ruffians.
Everything memorable in rugby league happened 30 years ago. But of course, greatness really has nothing to do with antiquity. In 1989, Canberra came from behind to beat Balmain in what many regard as the most exciting grand final ever. Author
In fifth, it was always said no team could do that. Well, they did that, and they took it out of Sydney and broke it, I think, didn't they? They dropped it off a truck or something.
That's right, they did. Laurie Daly.
Laurie fumbled the trophy.
The only thing he's ever fumbled in his life, I think.
That's about right, yeah.
In 75, you'll recall Eastern Suburbs beating the living daylights out of St George in that year's decider. Captaining the Roosters that day was one of the greatest ball distributors the game has ever seen. A tough old-fashioned front rower and one of the nicest blokes you could ever hope to meet.
I suppose you could say I was the original Dennis the Menace. I was a real bastard. But it was just one of those things, I suppose, that, you know, you talk about your childhood heroes and things like that, but, you know, to me, they were just a name on a radio. And, you know, I'd hear these people like the Gasniers, the Rapers and what have you, and, you know, and sitting out in my little hometown of Raymond, that's all, we didn't have television in those days, and you know, I always had a dream that if ever I came up against the Gasniers and blokes like this, you know, I'd always had plenty of faith in my ability to handle them.
And I believe you were a centre back then. Is that true?
Wing, I played everywhere in the back line, believe it or not.
Arthur Beetson, the winger, was a spent force by the mid-60s. But Arthur Beetson, the front row forward, was set to dominate the next 15 years of domestic and international football. His tiffs with English front rowers were well publicised, and so was Arthur's never-ending battle with the bulge.
Led, I never had your body, did I?
You're a centre, 5'8", come on.
No, I was, but as I said, I really had to work hard. People didn't realise that, you know, that I trained particularly hard, and I had to do a lot of extra training, and people, for some unknown reason, thought that, you know, I didn't train, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and I just turned up game day. I had to work harder than probably you do, without a doubt.
I've been involved in a few test matches over the years, but back in the 70s, it looked pretty tough back then.
When you go back when I first came into football in '66, you know, you had a lot of tough nuts running around, like the Kevin Ryans, the Johnny Sattlers, the John O'Neills.
So it is possible to be aggressive on the field, yet off the field be the nicest sort of bloke in town.
Mate, there's plenty of blokes who are like that. They were Dr. Jekylls and Mr. Hydes.
Pass to Sattler, who dashes through an
South Sydney's John Sattler may be football's definitive Jekyll and Hyde. Tom Riodonicus knows that as well as anyone.
If he stood on your head or ripped your arm out of its socket, like, he just wouldn't care. That's the way he was. But off the field, he's a thorough gentleman and one of the nice blokes of rugby league.
John will long be remembered as one of the Rabbitohs' greatest captains. But the Sattler legend pivots around one game, the 1970 Grand Final, won by South 23-12 over Manly. After copping a punch 5 minutes into the match, Sattler continued to play for the remaining 75 minutes with a broken jaw. It was one of the most courageous feats ever witnessed on a football field.
Yeah, a lot of people say to me, you know, you're mad playing on with that broken jaw and so on. But I just think that in those days also we didn't have replacements, and it was the done thing. Unless you were really injured, you don't go off.
We tried to cover for him, didn't we, Sol? We tried to cover him at half-time. Big John O'Neill said, no, and give the ball to Sats, because he wouldn't come off. We knew he wouldn't come off. And Sats was trying to talk through his mouth. He said, his words to the effect of, don't leave me out. So we started throwing the ball over his head, behind his body, across the front.
After we'd finished and I'd settled down and cooled down, I think the shock then hit you, an hour after the game or something. I had some difficulties then. But during the game, I could sort of push it back into place and hold it with my mouth and my mouth guard. So I suppose it just teaches you not to have your head in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Like many successful ex-footballers, John now earns a living in the beer business, running the Helensvale Hotel on the Gold Coast.
You both having 4 eggs?
In case you're wondering which players frighten Sattler the most, well, he's not saying. But he is prepared to nominate the best footballer he's ever seen.
Graham Langlands, I thought probably if you pinned them all down, he'd have to nearly rate as the all-time great player. Langlands could do everything. He could sidestep, he could tackle, he could score tries, he could play with a lot of pain, a lot of injuries. So when you looked at him, he was an outstanding freak, Langlands, and I really dipped my lid to him.
There are many who share Sattler's opinion of Graham Langlands. His powerful running and enormous sidestep shredded many a defence during the Saints' rampage through the 60s. Like Raper and Gasnier, Langlands also had to contend with the mixed blessing of playing in a team bristling with superstars.
If you play in a weak side, well, say 1 or 2 people might stand out, even if they get beat by 15, 20 points. But when you're playing in a team of, say, 10 or 12 have played for New South Wales and most of them have played for Australia, it's hard to get the man of the match in those days.
But Langlands had his fair share of best on-field performances, often combining with halfback Billy Smith to create one of the league's most dangerous liaisons.
Graham and I had a very uncanny system. I just know he'd be there, and I could sometimes throw the ball over my head, and I knew he'd catch it, or he could do the same to me. We just seemed to be like 2 magnets, and we seemed to read each other, and we followed each other, and everything just seemed to work out perfect for us. But don't ask me how it happened, because we didn't plan the training.
Billy employs the same unfailing instincts and blind trust with his new partner at Carlton and United Breweries. He may not have 50,000 people watching, but when you drop a pass, you know all about it. As for Langlands,
I've bought into a hotel over in the Philippines, over in Manila, and there's 6 of us in that, and the hotel's going well. We've also got a resort down on an island called Porto Galera, so I sort of spend half my time down there and half the time in Manila, and come over here when grand final time, and I come over about 4 or 5 times a year.
And 4 or 5 nights out a year with Johnny Raper is probably enough for anyone. After the break, Graham Hughes pulls up a stool with the man who put the spark into the 60s.
Well, actually, I thought I was Frank Sinatra and you thought you were Fred Astaire.
I did it my way.
Despite the fabulous talents of men like Gasnier, Fulton, Langlands and Messenger, 2 players are generally regarded as number 1 and 2 on the list of all-time league legends. South Sydney's Clive Churchill was one, and the other quite fittingly played for South's great rival, St George. Perhaps the fairest way to decide who was the best of all time is to accord Churchill the honour of best back and John Raper, our finest forward. Along with his 9 brothers, John grew up in this house in Camperdown in the 40s and 50s. At 17, he was playing first grade for Newtown and already cultivating not only his extraordinary football talent, but his well-publicised taste for the good life. In the eyes of many, John Raper became a rugby league immortal, almost despite himself.
If you want to have a good life, go out with Johnny Raper for a night out. It's sensational.
He is mad, mate. Yeah. I can't stick up for him that way. He's a good player, only a good player. That he led me astray, put it that way.
I used to go to the New South Wales League Club, and every time there was an old bloke on the door, I can't think of his name. He said, "You back here again?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You and Raper back here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you're both bad." Okay. And we've got to look in.
Peter Ryan and Puddin Spence played alongside Johnny in his early days at Newtown.
There's nothing like a night out with the old mates to boost your self-esteem.
A little bit.
You ever share?
Well, occasionally I did. I used to borrow some money off you before I used to go out and here, so it didn't matter.
You ever pay back?
No, I still owe you. I'm still on the O list, you know that. It's on the list.
Is it legend, or has it not been overdone, about the playing up away from the field of John Raper?
No, I wouldn't say it's been overdone that much. I love the drink and that sort of thing. I mean, geez, Tui's have been terrific to me over the years. So was Eagle Blue and Foster's and a whole lot of them. I mean, I would go out and I'd go on the binges, but I'd get up the next day and I'd train. I'd get up and I'd run around the golf course. I'd do about 10 miles around the golf course before I played a game of football.
Well, I suppose it's about time somebody mentioned football. However hard John liked to party, he never let it compromise his performance on the field. If he drank twice as much, he trained twice as hard.
I just wanted to play a game of rugby league the way Herb Elliott ran a mile. That's the way I went. I wanted to get out in front, and then when I finished the game, I wanted to finish all over the top of my position and finish 20 metres in front of them. So I knew that I had to be physically fit to do that.
And Johnny Raper was one of the fittest players around back in the 60s. Reg Gasnier remembers a particularly testing night when he and John celebrated a big win at Harold Park.
As we were coming home, I noted the sun was coming up over the horizon, and we didn't make training. Norm Provan phoned our wives around the place and said that he wanted us to front and centre that afternoon, which we didn't. We were still, pretty tired guys. But on the following Tuesday night, we got chewed out. Norm called us aside and gave us a terrible dressing down. And he just said if this wasn't a major game coming up, that we'd both be playing reserve grade. And as it turned out, we won the match, and Johnny got the best and fairest award, and I got the 2 points. So it must have done us both the world of good.
The overlap here. Ian Walsh, Johnny Raper, sailing for the middle.
John Raper may have played in tougher games, but he never dominated a match more than he did at Swinton in England in 1963. With the help of Diamond, Gasnier, Kelly and Langlands, Australia demolished Great Britain 50 points to 12.
It's one of those games, Graham, that every athlete has in his life. Everything just sort of went right. I'd run for the ruck, and there they'd be outside of me, Langlands and Irvine. I'd say, oh, this is all right, this is easy stuff. I'd pass the ball to them. If the gaps had opened, I'd chip the ball over the top, I'd catch the ball, and there they were again with me. And I really didn't know. I played so well. I never even read the newspapers because I was so happy afterwards. You know what I'm like after a game. I go and have a couple of bottles of champagne and that sort of thing. The Englishmen come off, and even though they did suffer a couple of injuries during the game, that sort of thing, they just shook their heads and said, we'll never play a better side than that.
That's a Raper.
Like Gasnier, Raper was very much a team man, making the break and then linking up with his wingers or centres. Like Ron Coote, who succeeded him as Australian lock forward, Raper's cover defence was also a joy to behold. John played in 8 premiership-winning sides in the Saints' amazing 11-year run, including the famous Mud and Guts 63 grand final win against many of his Kangaroo teammates from western suburbs.
That was a tough game. I don't know, fair dinkum. When I went out on the football field that particular day, it was just pouring down rain. And when you ran sideways, you had to keep running sideways. And you had that crazy Ned there singing out. Like, I remember one time I got the ball, and he's saying out to me, hey, Chookie, you can't go anywhere else but run straight at me. And I said, oh, God almighty, here it comes.
It will be a record that'll be hard to beat.
You see that moment captured in the photograph or in the trophy now. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot to me because Arthur Summons is a very special person to me, and actually it was great to see both two very special people to me recognised on the Winfield Cup trophy. I think they've been terrific examples in the game.
And Raper himself has been a terrific example. Despite a checkered career off the football field, Johnny remains an enthusiastic ambassador for the rugby league, which in turn honoured him with his job as Australian selector.
You talked about an idol like Herb Elliott, and he grabbed a gold medal. What does your wife, Carol Raper, deserve after all the years of rugby league?
Well, I got the MBE. I think she should have got the MBE. Funny thing about getting the MBE, I thought it was a member of the British Empire. She said to me, she said, it means mighty big head.
Coming up next, John Casey takes us back to where it all began. and catches up with the toughest halfback of all, Tom Ruddonica.
Here's my protege.
You're probably wondering what greyhound racing has to do with rugby league. And apart from the rabbit, I have to admit there's not much common ground. But way back in 1908, the very first round of the Sydney Premiership was played here at Wentworth Park. It cost sixpence to get in, and for sixpence more, you could sit in the grandstand.
The outstanding player of League's formative years was indisputably Herbert Dally Messenger. Dally played centre for the Eastern Suburbs Club and, like most of the early League players, was a convert from rugby union.
He was a freak. He could do things that no other player could do in that particular era. Apparently he could beat a man just so easily.
Looking back down those 80-odd years, you've got to say that he was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the amount of points, he was a very great goal kicker for starters, you know, that was one of the things he did. And kicked goals of enormous length. You know, there is one recorded in England that he kicked from 75 yards, which is a heck of a kick, isn't it? But
I can't walk that far.
yeah, he was a great prolific try scorer, prolific point scorer. Seen as being a selfish player, but maybe a few of the champions have been over the years, haven't they?
Messenger's Eastern Suburbs team dominated the competition during his last playing years, just as Churchill's South Sydney dominated the early 50s. But in one of the great post-war grand finals in 1955, Souths had to jump the last hurdle without their injured hero, in what sports writers often describe as a fairy tale finish. And Souths did it the hard way. Any good fairy tale not only needs a happy ending, but a pretty rough beginning.
We were going bad early in the season. We had a bit of a meeting. Everyone got a roast, including me.
I think you got the biggest.
I did, yes. Well, so we all had to put our shoulder to the wheel, and everyone played their part.
Once again, it was one of those incredible things. They well back at the turn, at the halfway mark, but then they won 11 in succession, including their semi-final, final, and the grand final, of course. And it was just, but in every match they seemed to come from behind.
With each successive match virtually sudden death, Souths received what must have seemed the fatal blow when Churchill broke his arm in the second last match before the semis.
Story has it, which I'm sure is true, that the arm was strapped up with covers of an exercise book, I think, at half-time. Churchill continued on and then kicked the winning goal to win the game.
A few weeks later, they found themselves in a similar position in the grand final. 4 points down and just 5 minutes to go. A late try brought them within a point of Newtown, and this time it was all down to Bernie.
As we're coming back, Jack said to me, kick this goal. That was a big enough thread. If ever a bloke had to kick a goal, that was the one that he had to kick, and I'm sure that if I had missed it, I don't think I'd have been sitting here having this this little talk now. I could have been in Fiji or...
He'd been exiled.
Bernie may have found himself in good company. It seems a lot of champion footballers, including Western Suburbs and Newtown veteran Tommy Ruddonicus, eventually respond to the lure of the tropics.
Oh, well, I just wanted a change at the time, and my lovely fiancée Terry, I just said to her, look, I'm going to Brisbane. Would you, do you want to come or what?
I should point out that Tom was never really known for his suave manner. Although Ruddonicus was ready for Queensland, you have to wonder whether the Sunshine State was ready for Tom Terrific. After all, the tenacious halfback did play 10 seasons for New South Wales.
They hated me because one time I came on as a replacement and Queensland had the game won, and I didn't start the blue on the football paddock, but the game just, when I went on, the game did change around, and we won the game, and the Queenslanders did hate me, and so I used to wear a T-shirt around like I hate Queenslanders on it.
That's the pass away to Ruddonicus. Nicely to O'Grady.
The best times I enjoyed were in the 70s with Western Suburbs. You know, we were known as the Fibro people. I had 11 years with Western. Those 11 years, they mean a lot to me. And because I remember the days we'd play Manly, and we just used to love belting Manly, you know, and that's how we beat them, by belting them. And And you look back and you can have a laugh, about it. So, they were great years.
Tom can also laugh about the advice given him by Noel Kelly before his debut first-grade game in 1969.
Well, he showed the first day that he was going to mix it with everybody that came along. So I said to him, Tom, I think you want to do yourself a big favour if you're going to play that way, and get a nice coloured photograph taken of yourself in a couple of years. You're not going to know yourself, So I think he did too.
Oh, Ned, he knocked a few blokes out in his time. But that's what he said to me, and I'll never forget those words.
Perhaps the highlight of Tom's career was captaining Australia to a win in the deciding third test against England in 1973, played in conditions better suited to ice hockey than football. 8 years later, he capped a memorable career by scoring a try that almost won the grand final for Newtown. Tom remembers perfectly.
Oh, the 60-metre one, I ran upfield and scored, wonderful. I beat about 6 players. So, and I used the referee as a shepherd too. But that was, that's using your brains once again.
Tom keeps his hand in calling football games for Queensland Regional TV. But early every weekday, you'll find him exercising that renowned Rhodonicus charm, trying to sell tomatoes to people whose only instruction in life was not to buy tomatoes from Tom Rhodonicus.
Tomatoes? Joe, here, seriously, $5. Come on, grab those. $5. Listen, what about egg tomatoes? $8.
Whether he's selling tomatoes or playing football, the key word for Tom has always been determination. He may not have been blessed with the natural talent of Sterling or Mortimer, but then they didn't have the Rhodonicus attitude.
I forget what year it was when Steve Mortimer made the #1 halfback spot for New South Wales, and I was the number 2. Well, they put me and him in the same room, and it was at the Ridge Motel here in Brisbane, and he walked in, threw his bag straight on the double bed, and he's virtually saying, I've got the double bed because I'm the #1, and I've got the single bed. And I said to him, what are you doing? He said, well, that's my bed. I said, you haven't got my Australian spot yet, and you've got to earn it. So I went to the window. I was 4 or 5 stories up. I opened the window, and the window overlooked the main road. I went and got his bags, and I threw them straight out of the window. He virtually didn't know what to say, and I said, I'll tell you what too. I said, I'm the #1 bloke here still, and I'll have a cup of coffee too, thanks. You know what he said to me? How many sugars?
Next up, Bob Fulton. And why the RTA has never offered Wally Lewis a gold licence.
Gee, I got to say, it's a terrifying experience, Wally.
Through the late 60s and most of the 70s, football's most dazzling star was Bob Fulton. Bob made his name playing for Manly and stamped it in capital letters when he represented Australia. Fulton was a brilliant and unpredictable centre or 5/8 who shone all the brighter amidst the chaos and brutality of early 70s football. In fact, 2 of his best performances against Great Britain in 1970 and Cronulla in the 73 grand final were exhibitions of consummate finesse against backgrounds of unrelenting hostility.
It was all over the park, in both games, and particularly in the 73 grand final. Manly went in as pronounced favourites, and I suppose the only way they thought that they could get an upset victory was to really, put the bustle on and go in with a very vigorous display, and that's exactly what they did. They really took to the game too Manly, and they nearly came away with it. I think they were the right tactics. Those tactics wouldn't work in the 90s or even the late 80s, but they nearly worked then for Cronulla.
But Fulton's 2 tries in Manly's 10-7 win soon put paid to that.
Then to big Mark Harris.
The tag bozo seems at times an unsuitable one for Fulton, a serious player, serious trainer and moderately serious Australian coach. But public perception is not always what it's cracked up to be. Bob places the origin of his famous moniker back in his early days at Manly.
When I first came up, Manly Warhorse and Freddie Jones I used to get him on all those little G-up things that I used to do, and he said, you're just a clown. He said, actual fact, you're bozo, and that name has stuck, right through all these years, and that's going back to the mid-60s when I first joined Manly. I've been called plenty of other things, I can tell you.
Summer sends it away to Lewis.
And most of them terms of endearment compared with the most talented and controversial figure of the 1980s. Wally Lewis rose to prominence playing in the Brisbane League and ended the decade with his likeness enshrined at Queensland's favourite battleground, Lang Park. Like all great achievers, Lewis also had his role models.
I used to like watching McEnroe. A lot of people used to say that, you know, he took his defeats the wrong way. He used to scream and yell and carry on. Perhaps he did. You know, I probably admit that a few times, but I just got the feeling that what defeat meant to the bloke. Even one point, he'd just about go through the roof if he lost that.
There was more than a touch of McEnroe in Lewis, as well as a talent for self-publicity. Qualities which endeared him to Queenslanders but infuriated New South Welshmen. Like Raper and Churchill, Lewis was neither big nor particularly fast, but nobody could touch him for pure football instinct.
Everyone used to say, gee, you showed remarkable instinct to take over from there. Look at that, there was nothing on and all of a sudden you ran to the blind and away you went. And I used to say, well, you know, we had 5 guys on the blind, they had 3. It's only common sense.
Wally's common sense rarely deserted him on the football field, but was conspicuous by its absence on the many occasions he piloted the Queensland team bus. The idea was to take off as quickly as possible before the last player on board had a chance to sit down. On one occasion, Peter Jackson tried to avert disaster by running back towards Lewis at the critical moment.
When I hit the brakes, he just got airborne. Went straight through past about 2 or 3 sets of seats and went head first through the windscreen. And there wasn't a sound except for the windscreen going, of course, and everybody sort of turned around. His head hit it, you know, went through it and then just came down and his head hit the dash and he bounced back onto the floor and didn't move for about 3 or 4 seconds. And I thought I'd kill the bloke, you know, I couldn't make a sound, and all of a sudden Jacko got up and went, great hit.
It certainly is, and it's in the
Lewis, who now spends his mornings at a Southport radio station, will be best remembered not only for his culpable driving, but for his complete domination of the first decade of State of Origin football. But, according to Wally, the pinnacle of any career in rugby league is still representing your country.
It's a little bit of a shame, actually, that a lot of people say that State of Origin football now is the number one. To me, Test match football has always been the proudest moment that you could ever have representing your country.
For men like Lewis and Fulton, the fundamental reasons for playing are still the same as they were for Messenger 80 years ago. The will to win still holds sway over financial rewards, and according to Noel Kelly, no champion ever needed a pep talk to come out firing.
I can assure you that if somebody slapped my face as we were about to go on the field, there would have been only 11 or 12 of us going.
Because where I come from, Bernie Purcell, one of the old sort of South greats, he lived just in Burke Street, Redfern there, and of course his mother used to wash his jumpers Sunday mornings, and they used to string up on the line with his shorts and his socks, and everyone just sit there and just watch his jumper and socks dry. And that was a sort of a big thing to play for South, like, you know.
We're talking about psyching up or anything. You didn't need psyching up. You didn't need a psychiatrist in the room or blokes blasting you or anything like that before you go out telling you what you had to do and what you didn't have to do. You put the jumper on and that was the lift that you had. Now,
perhaps it's a little cruel, but when you see how much rugby league means to guys like this, you have to wonder what they'd have done without it.
Who knows? You know, I often think about that. Would I be still in the PMG out at Roma, or would I be doing this? Would I, you know, would I have pursued some other profession? I fancied myself as a tennis player, but gee, I don't think I would have the mobility to be a tennis player.
I always had plans of being a boxer, you know. I really liked the sport. My mum wasn't real keen on the boxing situation at all, you know. And I had a few fights and that sort of thing. I was going along okay, but the local football team was part of the thing. It was good. You'd have to... You're a bit of a loner if you are a fighter, I'd imagine, you know.
Oh, well, I suppose I'd be down at Port Kembla in the steelworks working as a boilermaker. When I came out of school, my father, I was that way inclined. I was reasonably good at school at metalwork.
And what about the man who's lived, breathed and personified rugby league for the past 30 years? We'll say goodnight with Johnny Raper and his vision of living hell, life without football.
I actually don't know what I probably would have been. I probably would have went to work and been a Kerry Packer or someone like that, because I would have had to put the energy somewhere else, Graham, and
bought out a couple of breweries.
Well, probably I would have been the front man for a couple of breweries.
Well, with the 1993 Winfield Cup final to be played tomorrow, it only remains for me to wish both teams and their supporters the very best of luck.